Welcome to today's episode. We're diving into emotional blackmail, what it means, how it appears in daily life, and why it matters so much.
Emotional blackmail is a term that sounds dramatic, but it's more common than people think. It's really about using a person's feelings to manipulate or control them.
Right. It's not always obvious either. Sometimes it's subtle, like guilt-tripping or making someone feel responsible for your emotions.
Exactly. And the classic example is, if you really loved me, you'd do this for me. That puts pressure on the other person to act out of guilt.
I think a lot of people have heard or even used that line without realizing it's emotional blackmail. Why do you think it's so pervasive?
I think it's because it taps into our need for approval and connection. People want to be liked or loved, so they might give in even when it feels wrong.
And it's not always malicious, right? Sometimes people use emotional blackmail because they don't know how to ask for what they want directly.
That's true. It can come from insecurity, fear of rejection, or just not having good communication skills.
One form I read about is the punisher. This is when someone threatens negative consequences if you don't comply. Like, I won't talk to you anymore if you don't do this.
Yes, or the sufferer, who uses their own distress as a tool. Like, I'll be so upset if you go out without me. It makes you feel responsible for their feelings.
There's also the self-punisher, right? That's when someone says they'll harm themselves if you don't give in. That's really serious.
Absolutely. That can be very dangerous and manipulative. It often leaves the victim feeling trapped and helpless.
I think the tantalizer is interesting too. They use the promise of rewards, like affection or approval, if you do what they want. Sort of like dangling a carrot.
It's like, if you do this, then I'll be happy with you. That can really mess with someone's self-esteem over time.
Have you ever noticed how emotional blackmail can creep into family dynamics? Parents, partners, even siblings use it sometimes.
Oh, definitely. I once had a friend whose parent would say, "After all I've done for you, you owe me." That's textbook emotional blackmail.
It's tricky because those emotional bonds are so strong. It's hard to set boundaries when you care about someone.
That's the catch. The closer the relationship, the harder it is to recognize and resist emotional blackmail.
What are some signs that someone might be using emotional blackmail against you?
If you constantly feel guilty, anxious, or responsible for someone else's feelings, that's a red flag.
Also, if you're always changing your plans to keep someone else happy, or if you fear their reaction, that's worth examining.
Sometimes you might notice your self-confidence dropping. You start doubting your own judgment because you're always trying to appease the other person.
It can feel like you're walking on eggshells, trying not to upset them.
And the demands often escalate over time. What started as a small favor turns into bigger and bigger requests.
That slippery slope is real. I've seen it happen in friendships too, not just romantic or family relationships.
Definitely. Friends might use secrets or past favors to leverage what they want, which is still emotional blackmail.
So, if someone recognizes they're a victim of emotional blackmail, what steps can they take?
First, awareness is key. You have to realize it's happening. Keeping a journal of interactions can help spot patterns.
That's a good idea. Writing things down can make the manipulation clearer. What about setting boundaries?
Setting boundaries is crucial. You can say, "I understand you're upset, but I can't do this for you. It's hard, but necessary."
Sometimes people worry that setting boundaries will make things worse. What's your take on that?
It can get worse before it gets better. The person using emotional blackmail might push back, but holding firm is important for your well-being.
Support systems matter too. Reaching out to friends, therapists, or support groups can help reinforce your boundaries.
Absolutely. Having someone validate your experience makes a world of difference. You don't have to go through it alone.
What about when the blackmailer threatens self-harm? That's a really tough situation.
In those cases, prioritize safety first. Encourage them to seek professional help. But remember, you're not responsible for another adult's actions.
That's such an important point. You can care for someone without taking on their emotional burdens.
Sometimes it helps to use I statements instead of you statements. Like, I feel uncomfortable when you say that, instead of accusing them.
That tends to reduce defensiveness and keeps the conversation more constructive.
It's also good to remember that you can't control someone else's feelings, only your own actions and responses.
I think that's the hardest lesson for a lot of people, especially those who are naturally empathetic.
Empathy is a double-edged sword. It's great for connection, but it can make you susceptible to manipulation.
There's a misconception that standing up to emotional blackmail makes you selfish or uncaring.
That's so true. But in reality, setting boundaries is a form of self-respect and healthy relating.
Sometimes, people worry about losing relationships if they stop giving in. How do you address that fear?
It's tough, but a relationship based on manipulation isn't healthy. If someone leaves because you set boundaries, that tells you something.
That's a hard pill to swallow, but it's better than staying trapped in a cycle of guilt and anxiety.
Absolutely. Over time, standing up for yourself builds confidence and attracts healthier relationships.
Let's talk about the long-term effects of emotional blackmail. What happens if it goes unaddressed?
People can develop chronic anxiety, low self-esteem, even depression. It can affect every area of life.
I've read that it can make people doubt their own reality, almost like gaslighting.
Exactly. You start to question your motives, your feelings, even your memories. It's very destabilizing.
And yet, because it's so subtle, a lot of people don't even realize it's happening to them.
That's why conversations like this are so important. Just putting a name to it can be empowering.
Do you think it's possible for someone to stop using emotional blackmail once they're made aware of it?
If they're open and willing to change, yes. But it takes self-reflection and sometimes professional help.
That's hopeful. Change is possible, but it starts with acknowledgement and commitment to healthier communication.
I think we all slip into manipulative patterns sometimes without meaning to. The key is being mindful and honest.
And being willing to apologize and do better. That goes a long way.
Absolutely. Emotional honesty is the antidote to emotional blackmail.
What advice would you give someone who suspects they're being emotionally blackmailed but isn't sure?
Trust your gut. If something feels off, take a step back and assess the situation. Talk to someone you trust.
And don't ignore those feelings of discomfort or guilt. They're signals that something may be wrong.
Exactly. You deserve relationships that are based on mutual respect, not control.
Before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts or tips for our listeners?
Remember, emotional blackmail thrives in silence and confusion. Speaking up and seeking clarity can break the cycle.
And it's never too late to start setting healthier boundaries, no matter how long the pattern has existed.
Absolutely. Every step towards self-respect is a victory, no matter how small.
Well, that's all for today's episode. We hope this discussion helps you recognize and respond to emotional blackmail in your own life.
And maybe even start a conversation with someone about it. Until next time, take care of yourself and your boundaries.
Thanks for listening. See you next time.